Back then, when I was taking shots, I really didn't care who I'm playing. Am I playing 6 max or heads up? I didn't care. I just played, and lost my half of my bankroll at the heads up match.
Today we will be chatting with Finnish high-stakes cash game player Samu Alto. Samu was a former professional Counter-Strike player and has been playing professional online poker for over 15 years.
I've played video games my whole life. I like to test things with people. Like in Counter-Strike, you go with the one strategy and see what happens, and then you exploit in the next round. And poker is close to CS when you think about that.
In these 15 years, he has seen and survived it all, as he had managed to stay profitable and more recently rised up to become one of the bigger winners at high stakes.
It wasn't smart at all back then. I mean, my strategy was basically like, when I couldn't call blind versus blind situation, I 3-bet like 40% and defend 60% of my hands, basically. And every time when they check, I stab 100%. And it worked back then.
Would you say that in the beginning of trying to use solvers, your game took a step backward?
No, I actually got worse when I started to use solvers.
Any bad habits?
Yeah, I played too many tables and too many hours. So I mean, I can play like 30 hours straight without any breaks. When you play 10,000 hands in a one session, like you are not playing that good.
Yeah, I was curious. You mentioned that with Counter-Strike, you were doing a lot of traveling, but when I looked up on your hand up, I saw basically no caches whatsoever. Have you
one
ever
cache?
One cache? One cache? Okay, sorry. Don't want to.
Month ago.
Don't want to take away this this glorious moment. All right, there he is, Samu. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Samu, last couple of podcasts we have been chatting with guys that are, I would say, new kids on the block. You know, they had only been playing poker for 3 years, like young whiz kids. It's good to see a fellow old school player still in the mix at high stakes after, I think, 15 years you've been playing poker, correct?
Yeah, professionally for 15 years, but I think I started 16 years ago, so yeah, it's a long journey. Yeah, indeed.
So I wanted to start the pod off with getting some insights about how poker has evolved over the years, because some people who are listening, you know, they didn't even know anything about poker when you started to play poker professionally. So could you maybe share with us how it was to be a professional online poker player back in the days, and then compare it to what it means to be one nowadays? How has the job description of a professional poker player changed?
Oh man, where do I start? I mean, well, we didn't have any pre-flop ranges back then. Obviously, we just had to try and see what happens, basically. And yeah, after many hands, I kind of figured it out, and yeah, I don't know. Well, maybe I was lucky back then, of course, but I don't know. That was like a video game for me back then. Like, I enjoyed playing too much, and I was obsessed like crazy. So I don't know.
How did you go about like strategy, for example? What does trying to get better look like? Was it just playing and reevaluating, or were you doing some stuff off the table? I remember back in the days there were some stuff available. I think card runners EV, for example, I think was available, if I'm not mistaken. Flopzilla, these type of programs.
Yeah, I didn't use any of those softwares back then. I watched some videos from card runners, or Lego Poker was back then, but I didn't have any softwares at all. Like, I watched a couple of videos just only, and yeah, that's what it is for me.
When preflop ranges did come out, how far off were we? Do you recall?
I don't know. Maybe they came before I even knew they were existing, because I saw them first time like maybe 8 years ago or something. But I'm sure they came up much earlier, I think.
Were you more of a lone wolf when you started, or did you have like a group around you with some people that were also playing poker that you could chat strategy with? For example, if I talk for myself back then, the main way you would improve is to kind of discuss with other players and see what they think, because nowadays we have maybe like an optimal example like in a solver and kind of work our way backwards, but back then it was the wild west.
Yeah, I didn't have any friends actually who played poker seriously. Of course my friends were playing, but for fun basically all the time. Like I was only one who tried to win something and tried to make some sense for poker back then. It sounds funny when I say that nowadays, because it was so it wasn't smart at all back then.
What wasn't smart to pursue poker?
Sorry?
What wasn't smart back then to pursue poker, or the
I
way
mean my strategy was basically like, when I couldn't call blind versus blind situation, I 3-bet like 40% and I defend 60% of my hands basically. And every time when they check, I stab 100%, for example, and it worked back then.
I mean, it seems like a very good adjustment back then, right? Because I think the natural tendency of humans, and still is today, that we lean towards the passive side. But imagine 15 years ago. So I imagine that strategy was definitely crushing. I can definitely relate to what you said post-flop. I never tried a 60-40 strategy, big or smaller, but it's, I would have definitely been on board. But definitely, yeah, like basically when people looked weak, they were weak, right? Nowadays, it's a bit more hidden, I guess, right? People kind of hide.
People are more balanced nowadays, but back then it wasn't balanced back then. Like my friend said, actually, a funny sentence, because he said like, every time you are post flop, just rep you have a set, like every time, and people folded like 95% of the time. Sometimes they had to set, but
I remember like you would call, someone opened, you would call 4-6 suited because there were no preflop ranges, and as soon as you hit if you hit a 4, it was basically a set. You would always play call raise all in. That was just the line. People were just c-betting and then they always had over pairs. But when you go call raise, you always have a set, and no one would ever fucking turn a pair into a bluff. So that was like, it was probably like 15 years ago. I remember 14 years ago or something.
It might sound pretty maniac style, but it actually worked back then.
It did until at some point it didn't anymore, of course. You said you were playing poker with your friends and you were basically the only one that kind of those pursued it to take it a little bit more serious. Why or when did you realize like, hey, wait, this is like a skillful game and I can actually start to make a lot of money if I take this serious?
It was actually the first time when I played poker. I mean, we were at Seattle, I think it was 2006 or something, and we were actually playing Counter-Strike in the US, and we were really bored at our hotel room, and we didn't have any smartphones or iPads back then, so we had to figure out something to do. And some guy bought poker chips and cards, and we just, hey, what is this game, and let's play. And I pretty fast noticed like there's a skill aspect as well. Like, of course, it was pretty luck heavy game back then, but I noticed there is a skill definitely behind that.
How did you then what made you realize maybe something stands out? There's like, hey, wait, there's skill involved. And how did you start implementing the skills? For example, I remember learning that I would raise someone in position just to make him shut down so I could check behind the turn and get a free river. I think it was called the freeze play, if I'm not mistaken, right? And this was like, I remember I implemented it and it worked. I was like, wow, sick. I do this, then you do that. Wow, that's sick.
Yeah, I mean, because no one wasn't 4-bet bluffing, like, well, of course, not the first live game, but I mean online first years. So I could basically 3-bet every time, like because I never got 4-betted. Like, yeah, basically the same what you said, but it was pretty simple back then.
Yeah, it was just hey, if I do A, you do B. Okay, I'll keep on doing A. Nowadays, you know, you have to go down the whole alphabet to finally figure out your strategy. Oh, you have
Yeah.
survived in poker for over 15 years, which is obviously very impressive and definitely something to be proud of. Longevity then is a skill that stands out to me. It's one of the most important skills for poker success, and you have clearly mastered that. Could you maybe share with us some of the most important skills for or traits that you have developed that have enabled you to sustain success in poker over such a long period of time?
Yeah, I mean, you have to learn the game like, well, every year at least, if not every week. Like, you have to take your game to the next level. Like, I mean, you can't play your old game and be confident with that. Like, you have to evolve when a new school kids evolve. Like, they learn the game. Like, they are super good nowadays, and you have to just keep learning yourself.
Did you learn this? Was it was it like common sense to you, or did you have to learn this the hard way? Where you maybe was there maybe a time that stands out to you that you were maybe a bit stubborn with your strategy, not accepting that maybe you should change something and move on?
Yeah, I was fighting many years against solvers and stuff. Like, I was like the old school guy. Like, I don't need any solvers. I can figure it out myself. But after my results got worse, like, I had to do something, and yeah, so I started with my PO solver practices after that.
How did the so the introduction of solvers in the beginning, you were a little bit skeptical from what I'm understanding. I mean, I like I said, I went
Hmm.
through the same phase. I was also like this solver stuff, you know. And it's like,
Yeah,
what do you
exactly.
mean? Like that common response, but like yeah, my nobody plays perfect. So why would I play perfect? This is not what's going
Yeah,
on. Blah
yeah,
blah 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 blah.
yeah, exactly.
Um, how did that then both negatively and positively impact your game when you did at some point decide to use solvers?
Well, I mean, you have to node lock when you use the solvers. Like, that's the secret behind that. Like, I used it like 2 years without node locks, and I was like, I don't understand these calls because I'm playing uh, with the guys who are not that good, like 200 NL or 500 NL. Like, there's no point of having even a solver when you are playing those stakes like 5 years ago. So I didn't see any reason to use those.
Would you say that in the beginning of trying to use solvers, your game took a step backward, or do you straight away knew kind of what to do with this knowledge?
No, I actually got worse when I started to use solvers, but slowly I kind of learned how to use that correctly. Like maybe all of us are using the solvers wrong with a wrong style. I mean, you if you know.
Yeah, I mean, I have my fair share of experience of misusing, misinterpreting, misapplying solvers. It's definitely a skill that you develop over the years. Does any moment stand out to you that you are like, aha, this is what I've been doing wrong?
I can't remember. Oh, I'm not really sure. Like, first when I started to use solvers, I was like calling like solver does, and people are not finding enough buffs like maybe in every spot. So I was like, why I'm losing? I'm calling I'm playing so GTO, like I can't lose. Why I'm losing? I kind of didn't understand that at first.
Did you intuitively feel like something wrong? Because, for example, the strategies that you mentioned that you came up with in the beginning of your career, they came from a very good intuitive understanding of like, oh, you do A, I do B. And kind of a solver seemed to have kind of replaced that skill for you, and or kind of that skill had been forgotten.
Yeah, I got super rusty with my own game after my solver experiment. Like when I got tilted to solvers, I tried to go back to my old style, and I noticed people got super good in that time machine. So I was like kind of lost, to be honest, after that. And yeah.
What happened that made you? I mean, you're currently playing the high stakes, doing very well. So at some point, you found your path, right? What happened?
Well, I had to have a. Actually, I contacted to Patrick Howard back then, like 2 years ago, and I started to work with Patrick, and yeah, things got better after that.
Or like some of the main sort of aha moments when you started to work together with Patrick in this case?
I mean, he's good at explaining like why solver is doing that and those things. For example, like, well, hard to come up with any examples, but well, it helped me super much, like, because I was so lost with the solver.
How, for example, you're clearly, you know, because you started, but you've been playing for so long. How would you say, how much of your, let's say, old game and your initial skills do you now are able to be put on the table in your strategy as alongside with the solver knowledge?
Yeah, I still play. It's kind of mixed nowadays. I play with my old style, and I try to play GTO in some spots, but I still have my old style behind that. Like, it's a mix, basically. My own playing style nowadays.
What are like some of the positive things that give you maybe an edge over like these more new school kids, because of the fact that you've been playing so long? Or do you don't think it has any advantages?
Um, I'm not sure. Maybe I'm pretty good at controlling tilt. Like, I don't tilt like ever, and I can see from some new players like they are kind of swingy with their mood, and I don't know. There might be something edge because of playing that much.
I feel like older school players, because we rose up in a time where we didn't have perfect solutions and we weren't thinking about playing perfect balance strategies. All we were trying to do is figure out what the fuck our opponent has and what they're up to and try to, you know, adjust from that. And I feel like a bit more new skits, especially if you use the solver a bit wrong, you can be really in your head and only look at your own strategy, your own cards, and try to play perfect. Do you feel like that's something that, like that train of thought of at least trying to make sense of what your opponent's doing, what's actually going on the table? You think that's a skill that can give you an edge nowadays?
Sorry, can you repeat?
So, for example, nowadays in solver in the solver land, people are very much focused on their own strategy, trying to play good. Whereas in the old school, you know, we had to figure it out. So we were mainly trying to figure out, well, is our opponent, like you were saying, for example, well, I was calling GTO, but intuitively I knew people were not bluffing in this spot, which is a skill, you know, that was very valuable in the past because we were just trying to figure out what our opponents was up to, right? That's why you were stepping 100% when they checked.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, that's a good experience to have behind that, because like it just proves you were wrong. I mean, you were right back then. Like it like confirms your thought 15 years ago.
Does it, now that you understand the logic behind solvers a bit better, do you now feel like you came full circle and now you also understand why everything you've done in the 15 years, you know, at the times where you had a good strategy, it was working, you now understand why it's working, and you might now also be a better to able to understand in which situation that would still apply and which situation it doesn't, and kind of adapt. So you basically, what probably would have happened with you is now you're able to play more solid when the situation requires and play more your old style when the situation allows you to.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the pretty good skill to have nowadays. Like it's really helpful.
Any bad habits that you've picked up along the last 15 years that you have trouble getting rid of?
Yeah, I play too many tables and too many hours. So I mean, I can play like 30 hours straight without any breaks, basically. And I'm the last person who leaves the tables like 8 a.m. Like I play, I start at evening and I stopped at like morning, basically.
It's funny because you answered this as sort of a bad thing, but I can understand that this also has brought a lot of positive things in your career.
Yeah, I mean, when you play 10,000 hands in a one session, like you are not playing that good in some points. Like I mean, your quality is super bad when you stop your session. So I try to fix that habit, but yeah.
So how do you go about trying to fix out this bad habit? What are kind of the things that you're trying to do? I'm sure there's some people listening like, oh fuck yeah, I set an intention. I'm gonna play 4 hours. I'm gonna focus on this, focus on that. Before I knew it, 24 hours flew by, and nothing that I was trying to apply I've actually applied.
I mean, I've always played like any limits basically, like nowadays even. But I recently stopped playing the smaller stakes, so I don't have that many tables anymore. So, and it's easier to quit earlier when you notice you are playing your B game, when you have like 4 tables instead of having 12 tables.
How has your decision making changed now that you've only had 4 tables to think about? Do you notice that you're starting to see things that you didn't see before? How has that what kind of impact has this had on your play?
Yeah, definitely it helped my game so much, obviously. But when I was younger, it felt boring when you have only 4 tables. But when I look back, like I've always played my best game when I play only like 4 to 6 tables.
Over the 15 years, obviously a lot of you've seen a lot of trends come and go, metas come and go. What is like a specific meta in like poker that stands out to you in the last 15 years? You obviously started with 3-betting 100% because people weren't 4-betting basically. What type of metas stand out to you over the years?
Yeah, I mean, and when I started, I 3-betted like 100% and c-bet also 100% with 75 sizing, and people were folding 75% of the time. So, yeah, I remember the time when I played 1 year only pot limit Omaha, and when I went back to no limit Hold'em, there were a guy Linuslav who c-bet with the third pot sizing on the flop, and I was like, what is this? What is going on? And maybe 1 year later, everyone was doing that. So yeah, I remember that time.
Yeah, that was a very big switch when like the small c betting for new school players. They're like, what do you mean? Were you only betting big? Like
Yeah.
King 7 deuce rainbow here, 3/4. Let's go. And that was, I remember back then, I was like, well, and I will do this with my value, and I will do also this with my bluff. So I would open, bet 75% with both my value, both my bluffs, because then I'm balanced. You know, that was like the first idea that came into my head, that had anything to do with balance.
Yeah, and
Yep.
I have to say, when you check back, you are capped after that. You can't check back. You have to see bet every
Yeah,
time.
exactly. So, you know, because you're going to see bet your value, so you should also see bet your bluff, because else, you know, it's unbalanced.
Yeah.
Makes it very, very exploitable strategy. Now that I think about it, what do you say is the current meta nowadays in online poker?
I think everyone is playing pretty good. Like I can't really say anything like what is the meta of the game right now. I mean, it feels like everyone are drilling with a GTO wizard, and you are playing against bots. But of course, there is value in the game. But hard to say what is the. I don't know. It's a tough question. I saw you were limping a few days ago on a YouTube video, so maybe that's the upcoming meta.
Is that the new meta? Is that the new
Yeah.
meta? I mean, you know, you're referring to the coin poker game. I mean, it's also because we're playing 0.2 big blind ante, and I was with the fish on my direct left. So I mean, it's either, you know, I'm gonna knit it up, or obviously knitting it up it's no fun when you're on stream. So yeah, then I was like, well, I wanna be in there. So limping it is. That's kind of how it went.
Yeah, that was pretty
limped in the
creative.
7 deuce. You saw the 7 deuce, limped in the 7 deuce, re-raised, and then flopped.
No. I didn't watch that video.
Was a good game. Next time maybe I'll take that seat again, just so I can start limping again. It's fun. Do you ever limp? There's definitely some situations in non-normal games where I adapt to a limping strategy as well here and there. You like limping?
No.
No.
Never done that.
Never done it. I mean, yeah, you know, you were trying.
Wait. Actually, I had a time when I had a limping strategy from small blind, but maybe it was 1 year or something. So I don't have anymore.
All right, not in the limping camp. We were talking a little bit about like kind of the old school, let's call it, more exploitative thinking, and like the introduction of solvers, more theoretically correct thinking. How do you navigate the balance between implementing like the solver wisdom while staying on the lookout for exploits and looking at your opponent tendencies? As it's very easy to get caught up thinking what the solver would do all the time. How do you kind of find that balance? How have you found that balance nowadays? It seems like that was something that you were struggling with.
I mean, I take notes from people like a crazy person. Like I have hundreds of colors at my poker stars, for example. Like because nowadays people doesn't label players, like, you know, some rec does that, and you know, and but I still make the notes and try to figure out what is people like doing, and maybe come up with a GTO strategy against some players. But against some players I'm playing with exploitative strategy. Like if I know they are not doing any GTO work with themselves. So
yeah, this is kind of something that I see with new school players. They don't make any notes, they don't tag anyone, because, you know, I'm here to apply my strategy, right? Or they'll say, this is a rec. I'm like, okay, yeah, well, you know, what kind of rec are we talking about? You know, is he on like the foldy side? Is he a bit more aggressive? You know, does he throw out a little banana play here and there? You know, you know, what are we up to? And the same with the fish. This guy's a fish. Yeah, okay. Is it more like a whale? Is he aggressive? Is he passive? You know,
exactly.
What showdowns have you seen? What do you mean showdowns? They say, I don't look at showdowns.
Yeah, and for example, when I bet 50% against them, they go crazy, and when I go full bot, they just check call every time, for example. Or when I block bet, they mostly calls or something. When I try to induce them, I go half bot every time. That's the example what I do with my game.
Yeah, it sounds like I induce unjuice. I usually like to call it. Try a little 1/3 to induce some action. And when I don't
Yeah.
want to get that raised, I'll put in the unjuice, the half pot, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
just to not get raised. This is like
Mhm.
it's logical thinking, man. But like this type of
Mhm.
logical thinking that we had to learn more in the old school. The bit more new school players, especially the ones who are misusing the solver, like you were in the beginning, you know, they don't think in this type of way, right? Like the, how do we say it, like action consequence type of thinking.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I've played video games my whole life, so maybe that's the background of that strategy. Like I like to test things with people. Like in Counter-Strike, you go with the one strategy and see what happens, and then you exploit in the next round, for example. And poker is it's close to CS when you think about that in that perspective.
Mm. Adam, uh, someone's referring to Counter Strike. Do you have any background in gaming? I know you've been an athlete, but that's mainly outdoors. Have you also been spending some time indoors behind the PC, behind the PlayStation? Any gaming
I
history,
didn't
board
really.
games?
Board games with the family, but nothing to take home and note of. Mainly outdoor activities, to be honest. I was quite a sporty kid. So when I had free time, I was out in the fields playing football, going for runs, yeah, doing stuff with friends outside. And generally, poker was my first game that I really thought, wait a second, this strategy thing could be an interest of mine. So yeah, I can't relate to the gaming background, but yeah, obviously you have to get into poker. I can see the lifestyles somewhat similar, which makes me want to go into your background, where basically you did Counter Strike for 5 years professionally, from age 15 to 20. What was it like being a professional Counter Strike player, and what was your general lifestyle at that time?
Mm, yeah, it was. I mean, you had to play like 12 hours in a day. Like you sleep, eat, and play basically. And when you are not playing, you are traveling to events. Like I traveled worldwide for 5 years, so it was a busy time. I tried to go to school at the same time, but it wasn't possible really. So I had to quit school back then.
When you were traveling to these stops, how long were you there for? Was it like a weekend competition, or how was that structured?
We usually go to a training camp before any big event. So like it was like a 1 week training camp and maybe 1 week in the tournament. So maybe 2 weeks, and then I go to home to wash my clothes, and then go to other trip. So yeah, it
Was
was
it
busy time.
full on lifestyle? So, what were some of the lessons you learned from Counter Strike that maybe helped you transition well into poker?
uh, yeah, like I said, you learn to see how people react on the different things. Like in poker, when you attack, they are passive, and when you are passive, they attack, for example. And maybe, I mean, many things. I know many players who had been professional Counter-Strike players. They are now poker players, for example. I mean, some of them quit poker a few years ago, but back then, like 10 years ago, many former CS players were playing poker.
Was that one of the reasons you got into poker? Did you see other Counter Strike players playing?
Yeah, actually, two guys, Swedish guys, were playing professionally. When I played like NL10, they were playing NL1K, and I was railing every day them, and I was like, how they can play with the thousands of euros like every day? Like, what is going on? Is this real money or something? And I talked to them at China, I think, and yeah, they explained me how does that work, and I was super excited about that.
So for a novice like me, I don't know much about Counter-Strike, and I can't see the kind of similarities with poker, but you guys playing the game could see the overlap. So what were you seeing in poker that overlap with Counter-Strike that you thought the skill set can be reapplied here?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's a tough question. Like, how to say?
So with Counter-Strike, obviously you're not playing for money. So you're in a strategy game, and as you mentioned, watching other players play for money, you're like, wait a second, is this for real? How did you deal with playing a game which had financial consequences? And what was your initial experience of poker when you started playing for money?
Well, it was a small amount of money, of course, when I started, but of course it was exciting, but same time kind of scary. Like, I'm losing all my Counter-Strike money to the card game. Like, am I crazy or something? But yeah, when I learned to play, so it felt easy. After that, like, I didn't care money. Maybe 1 year after playing.
So you were getting a salary for Counter-Strike, and then you were using that money to start playing poker originally. Is that right?
Yeah. We got a monthly salary. It wasn't a big amount back then. Nowadays, they get crazy monies, but back then it was not so much. But yeah, I spent that on my poker career. When I started, I started NL 50, and I jumped into action, and I lost like 1K, I think, and after that I was like, I have to move down at stakes and learn actually how to play. And yeah, it was a pretty tough grinding session after that, but yeah.
A few questions come to mind. First of all, how did you begin to learn to play? And what motivated you? I'm thinking if you're playing such a high level of Counter-Strike, going to like learn a new game from a beginner level, it can be a little bit, why do I want to start a new game? I'm already good at this one. So what attracted you to want to learn poker from the low level?
Maybe it was the feeling at being right. Like, it was nice to know what people have. Like, I was guessing. I didn't guess the ranges. I guessed the actual hand. And when you were right, it was a super nice feeling. Like, I know pretty. I'm pretty good at this game. I was thinking back then, but yeah, I think that was the biggest impact and
When did you start
motivator.
to have enough success in poker that it became more of an option rather than just a side hustle? It became like the main thing, and you started to let your Counter-Strike career go to the side.
Yeah, I was living back then still with my parents, and I was playing in my own room, and I played like 1 year or something. And every morning when my parents were going to work, they asked me how much did I win or lose, and it was like maybe hundreds at first. And I remember the morning when I told my dad I won 1K on one night, and he was like, oh my God, is this real money? Or yeah, he was super excited about that. And yeah.
Was that a turning point?
I think it was, because I noticed there is serious money in poker, and my stakes got higher and higher. And when I moved from my parents, I bought my own apartment at age 12. 20, yeah, I was back then. So
I want to dive into this story. So in 2010, you're 20 years old. You've made enough money to buy your own apartment through poker, which is impressive enough. But what's even more impressive is the environment that you chose to do this. Could you share with the audience the story behind where you made your money for your apartment?
yeah, I mean, we have a mandatory army command in Finland, so I had to go to army at 2010 January, and yeah, I was grinding at the army, and it was pretty rough time because you have to wake up at 6 a.m. and you go to do whatever, and you got the free time at 6 p.m. So I started my session at 6 p.m. and I played like till 4 a.m. and I slept 2 hours and woke up again at 6 a.m. So it was a pretty tough time back then. But yeah, I made my apartment money, and when the army ended, I could move to my own place. So
a pretty tough time back then. You're in a full army day, then you're finishing your army day and doing a full grind through the night, sleeping 2 hours, wake up, rinse, repeat. I'm guessing you're getting woke up to some sort of army drill as well. How were you able to sustain that? And what kind of period was that over? How long were you, how many days a week were you grinding? I'm just curious to know how you were able to manage this over any period of time.
Actually, my army time lasted like 3 months because I had a knee injury. So I had to stop that, and it was pretty funny when I told to captain, like, I can't be here anymore, and he was like, yeah, I know, because you want to play poker. I was like, I mean, my knee is hurt really bad, so and he didn't believe me, and I wouldn't believe myself either, so I understand that. But yeah, I got home from there, so yeah, it was funny.
As you fake limp out of there, pretending the knees doing it. I'm in knees.
Yeah. It might look that, but it was actually really sore. Yeah.
Yeah. Life had other plans for you when poker was calling. So this time you took a large part of your bankroll to buy your apartment, and this put you under a lot of financial pressure. So talk us through what games you were playing before you bought the apartment, and where that left your bankroll, and which games you had to play after you had bought it.
I was playing 2Ks and 5Ks before army, and at the army I played 5Ks, 2Ks, 1Ks. Then I bought my apartment. Maybe 50% of my bankroll got there, and I was like, yeah, it's nothing. I can manage, and blah blah blah. Then I bought my apartment and started to play, and I I lost like every pot like in the next 6 months. And I had to drop down to NL 200, I think, or maybe 100. Yeah. And yeah, I started to grind again, and yeah, it went good.
How did you handle that step back from a mindset perspective?
Of course, it was. I couldn't tell my parents. I got broke after half year when I moved from my home. So like I forced to myself to manage. Like there was not an option to fail that. Like I decided to manage, and yeah.
There was no plan B. So plan A has got to be doubled down.
No. Only plan A.
Sometimes it's the way to go. So for you, I'm wondering at this time, what was your kind of goals with poker? So you bought the apartments, you've ticked that box off, which is a big milestone for a lot of people. What was driving you to keep playing? What was the kind of goals for the game you had?
Well, of course, my main goal was to reach the biggest levels. What was there back then? I think it was on full tilt, 200, 400 tables. But full tilt, I'm not sure what year was it, or was it stars? I'm not sure, but yeah, I tried to reach the highest level back then. So that was my goal, and that motivated me.
Is this similar to your mindset going into Counter-Strike? You're someone who likes kind of leveling up, getting better at a game, and kind of seeing how far you can push yourself?
Yeah, I was super excited about Counter-Strike when I was a secondary school. I woke up like 5 a.m. before my school days. The school started usually at 8 a.m. So I woke up at 5 a.m. to play 3 hours before my school day. And after I got back from school, I started to play and go to sleep like 10 p.m. when my mother said, now it's time to stop playing and repeat the same schedule day after day. So I was super motivated on Counter-Strike.
Sounds like you're the guy when you want to get a goal or achieve something, you'll skip sleep, you'll do whatever it takes to put the hours in, even when the hours don't appear to be there, which I think is a good skill. Obviously, you've got to balance that over time to make sure you don't burn yourself out. So yeah, for you, when you're back at this NL100, NL200, you've already reached 2Ks and 5Ks in the past. So for you, was your initial goal just to get your bankroll back up, get back to the levels you'd been at? Or what was your mindset around this period? Because I think this must have been a challenging period for you.
Yeah, yeah, of course, I had to get my bankroll back after that crucial 6 months, and after that, yeah, I move up on stakes, and I got to 10K at best. Then wait, what happened? It's it's just a long story, but at some point I got bored to no limit, and I was like, this is feeling boring, because I was playing three-handed with OTP, Red Baron, and Heklen, and I was like, this is not fun anymore. Maybe I was losing to the best players of the game back then, but I mean, there was no recreational players, and it just felt boring, and I kind of wanted to play something new, and then I found out like there is a game called Pot Limit Omaha, and many Finnish players are super good at that. So I was thinking like maybe I could be as good as them. So I started to play that, and yeah, I played it like one year without any no limit Texas Hold'em, and yeah, I was losing 1 year in a row to Pot Limit Omaha. I just couldn't figure it out. Like I still don't know what I was doing wrong, but yeah, that was a rough year. And after that, when I switched to No Limit Hold'em, I couldn't remember anything of my strategy, and once again I had to move down from 5K to NL 200 and start over.
Wow, so we've got these two big start over points. I want to go into this story playing Tottenham Omaha and maybe some lessons you learned through that journey. But the first thing that came to mind was, yeah, I'm wondering what made you continue to play Tottenham Omaha for a full year without much success. Are you just a stubborn person? Did you see some light at the end of the tunnel? Were you enjoying the game? What was it about that year that made you keep persistent?
Well, I was thinking like when I got volume in, like I will get better in this game. Like I don't want to quit anything. Like when I test something, of course I knew I was gonna be bad at the start, but when I play like 500,000 hands, I got better. That was my thinking process, and I didn't.
Why do you think you didn't take to the game? What do you feel like was some of the missing things that maybe, obviously you don't know because you're missing them, but why do you feel like the game didn't really resonate with you?
Sorry?
Why do you feel like you struggle with the game so much compared to other games you've played?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard to answer even nowadays, because I don't know. Maybe I was too loose, maybe on pre-flop, and too needy on post-flop. Maybe I'm not sure. It was new to me to be so bad at the game, so I felt kind of old back then. So I was like, nah.
So at this point, it must have been a pretty challenging transition going back into Hold'em, especially when you've lost a lot of your bankroll. You're now probably 8 9 years in your pro career. You haven't really got much to show for it because you just went for a big downswing, playing a new format. You must be like, what the hell? I've put a long shift in here and I've not got much to show for it. So first of all, what was your mindset going back into Hold'em? And yeah, talk us for like how you pick yourself up, because I imagine for a lot of players this would be the end of the story, but it feels like this is almost like the beginning of yours.
Yeah, I mean, I had to learn the game again, like like even the basics of the game. Like I had to check my ranges for the first time, what to open from anything and three bet from any positions, for example, and try to see what people are doing. It wasn't the solver time back then, but it was close to solver time actually. But yeah, it was tough time to learn the game because I was playing so much higher 2 years ago. So yeah.
For a lot of players, they would struggle to put their ego to one side. They played a lot higher. It's a game you've been playing for a long time. They have to relearn it at a lower level. It's very hard to do that from a mindset perspective and especially ego perspective. What do you think allowed you to just take on that challenge? Because a lot of players, I think, at this point would have went, all right, poker's over now. The glory days are done. It's got too tough. Even the lower stakes are hard. I'm out of here. You just went back in and go, right, let's learn this. Let's go.
Well, like I said, I didn't have a plan B. So I didn't go to school or anything. So I had to manage again. And I knew it wasn't impossible challenge to beat NL 200, for example. Like people weren't that good, but I was super bad. but I learned pretty quickly what the guys were doing, and yeah, it went good after that.
How long did it take you to get back to say NL1K from that point?
I think it was like 6 months or 12 months maybe, but yeah, it was a slow grind, but yeah, it went good.
And what was the new goal at this stage of your career?
The same as earlier, to reach the highest levels.
Okay. The goal stays the same. There's a consistent thread line going through. So you say the goal is always to play higher. Yeah, you spent a few years or quite a while stuck at, say, NL 500 to NL 2K. Why do you feel like you didn't push past those levels quicker?
Yeah, I mean, I said I was maybe too confident on my levels because I had a great win rate and I like to withdraw my bankroll like in every month. And I didn't raise my bankroll. Like I didn't decide like I'm not going to withdraw my bankroll in 6 months. Like I withdraw like in every month, and it didn't got bigger at any point. And in some point I realized that, like I don't need to withdraw, and I need to raise my bankroll. And after that, I mean, it's the maybe my biggest league because I withdraw too often from my bankroll. I mean, I got confident with my stakes, and yeah.
When you say withdraw your bankroll every month, were you spending it on stuff? Were you investing it? How were you generally managing your money?
Yeah, investing maybe too much and spending too much, and yeah. I mean, it's a wise way to use money to invest, but when you are trying to reach the highest levels, you just need to raise to get your bankroll bigger, of course.
When did your mindset switch on that? And when did you start building your bankroll so you could play higher?
I think it was a few years ago when actually Elis Pärsen, Finnish PLO player, said in one interview, like what is his biggest league in his career, and he said the same thing, like he shouldn't withdraw his bankroll at any point, like as little as possible. So it's a quicker way to reach out the highest levels when you are not doing that.
So once your bankroll started to increase by not withdrawing at all, was it a smooth journey to the 5K, 10Ks and above, or did you feel like there was levels that you found difficulties with when moving up?
Well, of course, it was at start pretty rough, and at some point I started to win pretty much at 5K after I worked with with Patrick, so it helped me, and yeah.
For you, so the goal's always been to play higher and play higher stakes. When do you feel like you've achieved that? When does the goal get fulfilled in your mind, currently or as you went through your journey?
Well, I'm still trying to reach that because I don't count myself on the very top. Like I'm still on my journey, and I'm trying to reach the goal.
Just getting started, warming up.
Yeah, exactly.
So with that, would you class yourself as quite a patient person in terms of you applied yourself for a long time? I know you've only had poker as your plan A with no plan B, so it's probably been like a singular focus, but also you've been obviously persistent and applying yourself for a long period of time. Are you someone who's class yourself as consistent or patient towards your goals? How would you generally define how you've been able to keep 15 years of a goal in mind?
Maybe I'm patient. Like I don't know how to answer else. Like yeah, it takes time.
You also say like hasn't been any other options other than poker because you didn't do school, but I'm guessing as you've grown your bankroll, other opportunities became available, whether through investing, other opportunities. There's not like just one path that's mapped out, although you've chosen poker. Do you feel like it's been easy for you to stay on the poker path, or do you feel like there's been opportunities or times when you've thought about doing something else?
I mean, when I was turning 30, I was thinking like maybe poker is over for me, and I will go 1 year at a time. Like, but yeah, still nowadays it feels like a funny game to me, and I like to play that. So why would I quit?
You still enjoy it?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned earlier with Rene that you can play these crazy long sessions, like 30 hours without a break. How have you developed your ability to focus? I'm guessing Counter-Strike had a little bit of a building block there. How have you been able to train your skill to focus for long periods without distractions?
It's hard to say. Maybe I'm good at. I'm not sure. It's tough to play long sessions. Like you have to concentrate like 30 hours in a one seat. So I don't know. Maybe it's the video games in the background on that. But yeah, you can't really learn that. Like you have to play long sessions.
Yeah, I think 30 hours would be the extreme version, but I'm guessing your average session length, say maybe 8-10 hours. Even then, that's quite a long amount of time to be focused for, which I'm guessing for you feels quite comfortable compared to a normal player.
Yeah, I try to play 4 to 6 hours nowadays to get my A game only.
Okay, interesting. So what were you playing before that? Obviously, the 30 hours is an exception. What was your general approach before you decided on 4 to 6 hours?
Maybe 8 to 10 hours was pretty standard to me. Maybe 5,000 to 10,000 hands in a session. So
What made you shift?
I had years when I played over 1 million hands, and when I didn't play 1 million hands, it felt like I was lazy or something. When when I look back that volume, it's pretty unique. Like there are no that much players who played like million hands in 1 year. So
Yeah, I think it's easy as well to get the metric of how many hands you play as like the win. It's like, oh, 1 million hands, that's the biggest win I can get. And then anything less is, like you said, lazy, not putting enough effort in. When did you shift your mindset towards, let's say, more quality over quantity? When did you decide, okay, actually playing 500,000 hands at high quality is better than maybe playing 1 million? Because I'm guessing that wasn't a smooth or natural transition.
I mean, I've always know that like when I play less hands, I play so much better. But it's hard to execute when you are actually playing, like because I'm I'm obsessed with the game, and it's hard to quit my session. And when there's recreational players playing, I can't quit. I will play as long as they are playing. And there's new recreational comes, and I was like, I can't quit my session basically.
Do you think that's something that you're pleased with in terms of, does that make you the most money? Because I think all these decisions in the moment, you can get caught up in it, but then after you reflect on it, it's like, was that a good decision? And sometimes it's like, yeah, actually, that was a lot of money there. Other times, like, nope, my sleep is ruined. I feel a wreck. So for you, do you feel like these decisions to stay up and chase the fish money is generally a good one?
Most of the time, there are bad decisions, like when you are half sleeping at your chair, and like I shouldn't be playing right now. I'm so tired, and the clock is like 10 a.m. Like you have to go to sleep. Like yeah, usually there are really bad decisions, and I try to avoid them nowadays.
Experience and wisdom gets you to make those less often. But I'm guessing still occasionally you fall into that pattern, especially when it's a big whale there. How do you recover from those days? Let's say you have one of those 8 a.m., 10 a.m. long grinds. How do you get yourself back on track? Because I feel like a lot of players struggle with this. When they go off schedule and they do these marathon sessions, how does that affect the rest of your week? And how do you get back into a more stable routine again?
Yeah, it's pretty depressing to wake up at 7 p.m. Like when, I mean, when you're living in Finland, there's darkness everywhere at 7 p.m. So yeah, it's really depressing to. I try to avoid that as well. Like I try to keep my schedule like in balance, but sometimes it goes totally opposite, and yeah, it's not fun.
What does a balanced schedule look like for you these days?
Well, I'm not sure is it balanced, but I try to go to sleep 6 a.m. and wake up at 3 p.m. so I'm able to see sun sometimes. But at summer I try to avoid playing that much because the weather is so good in Finland for 3 months in a year, so I try to enjoy that time.
A seasonal grinder. You take the summer to do more fun stuff.
Yeah, it's easier to say than execute, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine when you've got that love for the game. What do you feel like still keeps poker curious for you? Because you've been playing 15 years. I'm sure you've seen many runouts, every kind of combo you can, every player type. What do you feel like still keeps this game 15 years later still novel, wanting to learn and wanting to improve?
I mean, it's interesting when the game changes, like in every year, basically, and it's interesting to learn what people are doing. And I'm not sure. It's yeah. I mean, the game evolves in every year, so it keeps me interested of the game.
Do you enjoy how players are trying to implement different strategies? Are you more curious about the kind of human side of how players are changing rather than like your own knowledge of how you're learning the game? If that makes sense.
Sorry?
Do you feel like you've got a curiosity for how other players are trying to change their strategy over time? Are you like a curious guy of what your opponents are doing and trying to keep up with the kind of psychology of your opponents? Is that something that you gravitate towards more than just like learning your own strategy to a higher level?
Hard to say. Hard to say. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
There's something keeping you going. You've got this curiosity which you enjoy. So of the habits and routines you've established, which do you think have been the biggest game changers for increasing your poker performance? This could be anything from time you go to bed, exercise habits, just grinding less, studying, any habits or routines that you feel like have moved the performance needle the most for you?
Well, like I said earlier, the balanced schedule is pretty important to like eating and sleeping good before my session. It's super important. Like a few times in a month, I go to play without eating that good or slept really bad or something, and you can instantly see that on my results. So that's it. Pretty important.
Interesting. What's your pre-session meal choice?
Maybe chicken and rice, maybe. Yeah, and broccoli.
Nice. Not a burger or a pizza. That's good.
Yeah, yeah.
For you, how do you make food choices around the grind? I think this is the one as well for players who play larger volume. I know you've cut down your volume more recently. How do you think about food choices around the grind? When you're going to break, do you just wait till you get hungry? Do you have food prepared? How do you generally structure your meal choices around the grind?
Well, that's a bad habit because I don't really have breaks on my session. Like I don't have snack breaks or anything. So I mean, I don't eat when I play. I play when I stop playing. I eat when I stop playing. But
Do you
yeah,
have any hunger
I
whilst
have to
you
fix
play?
that habit.
Mhm.
Sorry.
What happens if you get hungry? Like, say you're playing 10 hours or 8 hours in the old days.
No, I forgot everything when I'm playing. I'm just super focused on playing. So I don't know what is being thirsty or hungry or anything.
Wow, you override survival needs. It's impressive. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can relate to that at times by getting your sword mace and stuff. You forget that you're hungry, and you finish. And you're like, I'm absolutely starving. But yeah, it's quite impressive to have that as a default, and you never think about food. So yeah,
Mhm.
if you can pull it off. All right, for you, you mentioned earlier that you don't tilt. I'm wondering, did you have to work on this? Have you always been someone who doesn't get any emotions whilst you play, or has this been something that you've developed by years of experience?
I don't know. I'm pretty calm person. Like I don't tilt like ever. And I think it's from my parents because they are super cool as well. Like I've never saw they go crazy or anything. Like so I think I've learned that as a child. So yeah. So I didn't ever practice or anything. I don't have any like mental issues or anything. So
Yeah, that sounds good. Sounds like good role models around you kind of instilled maybe a good emotional regulation, and you didn't, yeah, feel the need to express emotions or dissatisfaction.
yeah, I
So for you,
remember
what,
my dad always said like it doesn't help when you go crazy. Like what does that help? And
Mm.
it was a pretty good advice.
Yeah, it's so true. It can be hard sometimes to let the rationale overcome an emotion. For example, if I go, I shouldn't be angry right now, but I am angry. It can be hard to kind of override that. But yeah, it's a true
Mhm.
thing where if you actually reflect, often the emotion that you experienced didn't help the situation, especially when you're kind of lingering in an emotion, you're just frustrated, and you kind of complain about something. It's like, all right, this is not helping. Do you want to
Mhm.
drop it? So yeah, really good. All right.
Yeah.
So for you, in terms of like your personal life, we talked a lot about poker. What does life look like away from the tables? Do you have any hobbies that you still do? Do you have any things that you do away from the tables that create some sort of balance for you?
Well, I try to exercise like every week, but I'm pretty lazy nowadays. I used to exercise more, and I might start again. But yeah, I'm chilling with my girlfriend and my dog, and we are watching movies and making food and pretty basic stuff. I don't have any that kind of hobbies. Like, hmm. Yeah, and on the weekends I spend time with my friends and family and pretty basic stuff.
Do you take set days off a week, or do you have any regular days off from poker, or do you just do it based on feel?
Um, well, I play mostly every day. Actually, maybe 6 days in a week. I try to keep one day off the tables. But yeah, I still play when I'm hangover or something on the Sundays or Saturdays. So
Every day is
like
a poker day.
like all days. Yeah.
Hmm. I wonder for you, how do you deal with making mistakes and like the uncertainty that's built into poker? I know that maybe now you've got a lot of experience with kind of maybe learning from them, but as you've went through your career, have you had any challenges with how you've dealt with uncertainty and making mistakes, especially as you've tried to progress?
Well, yeah, I've had some frustration tilt like yeah, some spots are really frustrating for me, but yeah, I'm not sure.
How do you approach risk taking and moving up stakes? So you mentioned earlier that you were taking up a lot of your bankroll out of your every month, so you didn't have a bankroll growing. I'm wondering, like for you, when you think about shooting higher, how do you kind of think about the risk versus the opportunity? Because every player sits there with their bankroll and they go, what stake should I play in? And if you've got a good win rate, there comes a point where shooting the highest stake often makes the most sense. And you've obviously moved up all the levels. You've actually moved up the levels probably 3 different times, just stopping and starting and going again. So I'm wondering for you, how do you process taking risk in terms of shot taking higher, and when's a good time to make a jump?
Well, if you can handle the money behind the stakes, you should always take shots. But it can be really frustrating when the shots go over and over, not so good, and you lost like 100 buy-ins on your normal stake. So I know that feeling. That's not a good feeling.
How do you know if you can handle it?
Well, when you make the same thing over and over, you kind of get used to it, and you have to live with that, and with your decisions. But yeah, it's tough.
Are you someone who, like, say you shot take and it doesn't go well, would you generally just be ready to go again somewhat quickly? I'm seeing that in terms of, because this kind of trial and error of taking risk, it's not always black and white of it goes well, it doesn't go well. There's often like a bit of stop-startiness to it where you'll shot take a new level, get slapped around a bit, go back, rebuild, and go again. But the mindset that you have throughout that period, I think, is important. So for you, like, let's say you shot take another level, you take a step back by losing the buy-ins, would you be quite quick to want to try again? Or how would you generally process those moments?
Yeah, you have to. I mean, I'm the person who just regrind your bankroll and go to take shot as soon as possible. Like, and it's never ending circle, basically.
Interesting. So what allows you to do that? How do you frame shot taking that makes it almost like a free roll to shot take? Because it feels like that's how it looks.
Yeah, of course you think the level is rigged or something, and you are so crazy about that, and you are feeling bad even to take shots. I know some players are like that, and me including, like, it feels so bad to take shots, and every time they go not on my way, and it might be scary, but yeah, it will turn out when you try that many times.
How do you keep your motivation high? I'm curious to know, about 15 years of showing up every day, it still feels like you want to keep learning, want to keep playing. I'm just wondering how you keep that motivation so consistent for so long.
Well, good question. Maybe that's the video game habit behind my at my background, like, because I like playing games and poker is a game, so why not to play? Even I've played the game like 15 years, so but I still enjoy that, and yeah, why would I quit?
Every video game's fun until you complete it, or you get bored of it because the stimulus and the novelty wears off. Why do you feel like poker keeps bringing you back in? I'm sure other games you've played for a year or two, maybe less. Poker's 15 years. It's still the infinite game. Is it the never getting to that final destination? I'm just curious because a lot of players would, myself included, get an end point where you're like, okay, I've played it for long enough now. I'm kind of, motivation isn't as strong as it used to be. But for you, it feels like it's almost like a trick question. You're like, yeah, of course it is. But I'm curious to know why you feel like poker still has that appeal to you.
Well, I'm still on my journey to reach the highest level, so I can't quit at this point. So, well, we'll see what happens in 5 years when I'm 40, but maybe I get too old and I give up. But at this point, it's not an option for me.
Let's do a thought experiment. We go 5 years in the future. It's your 40th birthday. You're playing the highest stakes in the game. You're crushing, got a nice win rate, and you've ticked all the boxes. You can't say play higher because you're playing the highest possible. How do you think you would think about poker then?
Maybe I quit when I reach my goal and move on the next game. Maybe bot limit Omaha or something.
Go again. No battle scars for you. You're ready to start that quest again.
Oh my god, yeah. Hope not.
Well, you never know. It could go very differently this time. It's interesting, isn't it? Because like when you're when you're climbing a mountain in your own head, you've got an objective and you're climbing that next step. It's almost like the motivation's just there because you want to get to that next level, regardless of what it looks like, regardless from the outside, because it's clear in your mind there's a jump that you need to make, and the intrinsic motivation to keep going is very strong. And I think for you, what's been obvious for your career and your longevity is you've always felt like there's the next level to climb to. You've never felt like you've got to a level where you're happy with, you're comfortable. I think a lot of players will get to certain stakes where they feel their lifestyle changes or they feel they've achieved some objectives. But it feels like for you, because the goal is the highest, there is no, the climb is just there until you get there. So yeah, I'm really motivated and inspired by the fact 15 years later, that is still there. That's a North Star that's lasted 15 years. Where I think a lot of players and people would generally have changed goals, changed priorities, but you've kept it strong, which is very impressive.
Yeah, it's crazy to think, like, I couldn't picture myself playing 15 years. I thought it's gonna be like 5 years and I quit and move on with my life. But after 15 years, it sounds crazy.
It still feels like it's getting started, which is even crazier.
Yeah.
We have teamed up with partners in the poker industry that, in our experience, can help boost your poker career. First one being Universal Poker. If you are playing online poker without a good rakeback deal, you are leaving money at the tables. This is where our partnership with Universal comes in. Whether you are making a new account or want to boost your existing account, we can give you the best deals on the market. But what sets Universal Poker apart in today's market is carefully selecting the sites that they decide to work with, only collaborating with the sites that have their shit together and that offer a clear line of communication to the people up top. This line of communication makes them more like personal assistants for players rather than just an affiliate, which in my opinion and experience adds a very big boost to the deal. Visit universalpoker.com, link in the description. Be sure to enter code MECHANICS to access the exclusive deals we've arranged for our listeners. universalpoker.com and enter code MECHANICS. Next, GTO Wizard. If you are a frequent listener of the pod, you know that 90% of our guests use solvers to get ahead in the game, and GTO Wizard is by far the best and most accessible tool if you want to use GTO to get ahead as well.
We are proud to announce a technological breakthrough. Introducing GTO Wizard AI. This powerful technology can solve any custom poker spot in seconds to high accuracy. Unlike pre-solved solutions, this allows you to edit the solving parameters. That means you can modify the ranges, change the stack and pot sizes, customize the betting tree, and automatically simplify and optimize your bet sizes. Brace yourself. The meta is about to change.
So sign up to GTO Wizard using the link down below, gtowizard.com/mechanics. Get 10% off on your first month and join the weekly coaching webinars, of which one every month is with me. Looking forward to educating you guys over there. But without further ado, let's continue today's episode.
Rene, I'm curious to know for you. You've also had 15 years in poker. How have your goals and North Stars changed as you've grown in poker?
I would say I had a similar experience to Samu, where I kind of scarred myself in the beginning. Then I had like a period where I was just playing mid stakes, cashing out, living, basically like a lot of safety. Then I got into touch with Flores, friend of mine, and he instilled this belief or this idea that we could actually become the best. And I never really thought about that. So when he instilled that belief, like, okay, we're going to try to become the best, you start to think like, okay, wow, okay, if I'm going to try to become the best, what would I need to do in order to become the best? And then you start things, and then, you reach up. And I remember that for me personally at my peak, then at some point I was like, yeah. But that was interesting because when I came to my peak at that moment, I was not the best, but I felt like I was at least competing with the best. And there were just a couple guys that I figured I was not going to beat, like Linus, J-Sam Gill, Big Blind Bets back then, OTB. I was like, but I feel like the rest I can take. So yeah. And as soon as I kind of got there, I was like, yeah, now what? So that was interesting for me. And then that's actually when I switched into coaching and stuff like that, because I felt like in order to keep on growing, I had to start to do other things as well. So that was kind of where for me it started to kind of pursue other goals than just playing poker. I'm wondering, Samu, you said that you're still on your journey. What would you need to improve in order to reach this goal of yours?
Well, I'm not gonna relive my leagues, but I'm working on them, and hopefully they will turn good for me. But
how do you go about like finding your leagues, improving your game?
well, I'm checking my database with my well, yeah, I look on data on my playing and some hands, and I look with the wizard at my played hands and my stats, and and try to find some exploits on players, like what they are doing to exploit me, for example, and yeah.
Are you trying to look for like behavior that is outside of, let's say, the norm that they might show to you, and you kind of wonder like, okay, why would he do that to me? Is that kind of the process that you go through?
Yeah, basically.
And in terms of like leak finding, basically you're trying to look at your data, trying to see where you're solid, and any spot where you deviate, you kind of wonder, okay, why is this on purpose? Then I guess you drill a lot. Do you do a lot of drilling, GTO Wizard? Like drilling in the spots where you're currently leaking to find, like, for example, let's say you're overfolding big blind for a small C bet. You go in the Wizard and see, okay, which hand do I constantly miss, and train those hands. Is that kind of how it looks like?
But yeah, that's a good example. Like, yeah, that's really helpful to drill those spots, which occur super often.
Do you nowadays prioritize study, and do you also feel like it's easier to prioritize study when you kind of know what to look for? So, for example, I can imagine, you know, a lot of our audience also listening, everyone's motivated to improve, but they're like, yeah, what do I need to work on? But I feel like when you, and this is also when I feel most motivated to play poker, when I'm aware of leaks and things that I have to improve, that's when I become most motivated. I start a session, I can try to improve on this, improve on that. Does that seem familiar?
Yeah, that's a you said it like like it is. Like, yeah, you should drill at the spots which occur the most often times. Like, for example, blind versus blind situations, which is like every time when you're playing. So that's a good example.
What do you feel like is a big waste of time that people put a lot of time into in poker that's actually not really adding a lot of EV to their win rate?
I don't know. Hard to say.
What in the past have you spent a lot of time on that in hindsight was maybe not a big contributor to your win rate?
Well, like I said earlier, like playing too long, and I didn't table select at my old days. Like, I didn't know what means table selecting. I selected the tables at the start of my session. I played them, and when when they died, I opened a new one. I didn't know what means to table select, like back in the day.
To be fair, back in the day, I share this table selection was, I don't know, I just start up tables and let's go, you know. But it was also, I feel like, less important. To be fair, maybe when I was in a downswing, I should have, or when things were not going my way, maybe that was actually something that was missing. So I'm not really sure. What do you think sets the high stakes guys apart from the mid stakes guys? Right, you're on your journey, you're trying to rise up the stakes, beat the best. Sure, you know, you're looking at your own game to find, you know, weaknesses that you can improve, but you're also looking at other people's games, right? And when you face these tough opponents, what do they do that make them so tough to play against?
Well, they don't fold as often as players at medium stakes, and they can find bluffs in every spot. Like, you have some spot when you know people are not never bluffing on that spot, and when you play high stakes, people are capable of finding those low frequency bluffs, for example. But yeah, I think that's well, maybe that's a boring answer, but it's true.
Does that trigger, like, for example, I understand what you mean. Let's say you play versus a more nitty opponent that's never going to find a bluff and that's always going to overfold. Like, there's a lot of certainty in your decisions. Like, you just always bluff this combo and you just never hero call in a certain spot. When players get better, you know, they play better ranges. You're basically being put in more indifferent situations, right? Does that trigger more uncertainty and doubt when you play, and how do you handle that in sessions, right? Because there's less spots coming up where the decision is easy. Does like and doubt ever creep in, like, because you're constantly in like these indifferent situations?
Yeah, of course, you might be skeptical when you are, and you start to think like, are they just bullying you around because you are taking shots and you like think they are superhumans or something? But they might actually overbluff in some spots. Like I don't know, it's hard to say, but yeah.
Yeah, I feel like for a human, it's impossible to make you indifferent like a solver makes you indifferent. So there's always, if we really put all the responsibility on us, there's always a way to try to figure out if it's more likely that he's over bluffing or under bluffing, just accordingly. But you know, when you have a bunch of tables, it's just very hard to pull off, especially when it comes down to the more unnatural bluffs. I feel like when you play versus an opponent who finds them, it's easy then to find them too often. So you either have someone who just never finds them, and then you have the guys who find them always, you know? Because, you know, if you can only, you know, if only pocket deuces or pocket threes at a certain frequency is allowed, but you have deuces to fives, yeah, you know, you know, and it's like, oh, I have a low pair, I should bluff this.
No, so to evaluate, you have to bluff.
Exactly, you know, it's like, I'm curious, what you know, 15 years of poker, what is the best advice you've ever been giving in poker? And how has that impacted your career or your life in general?
To advise what I got from someone?
Yeah, the best advice that you've got over your poker career. That has either improved your life or your poker career.
Maybe table selecting to finally know what that means. Like, you don't have to play with 5 regulars for 12 hours. Like, you can quit the table and select the easier table, for example, and if you care money. But if you want to play, go ahead.
Did you have any resistance accepting that, you know, this is a reality of poker? Or when this was explained to you, you were like, oh, thank you very much, let's go?
Well, it took many years to me to understand that, because I mean, it might look weak when you quit the best players. Like, again, it's the background of me to play games at high level, but I mean, you can't quit the games. You have to play them until the guys will quit.
I feel like also, and you know, we're talking about quite extreme, but obviously there's a difference between just hopping any table and not having any selective criteria to at least, you know, make sure that, you know, when you're battling, you're not against you're not up against number 1, 2, and 3, but maybe against number 10, 15, and 20. You know, that's already an improvement, right? From playing 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, and especially when you're taking shots, you have to you have to table select something, at least nowadays. But back then, when I was taking shots, I really didn't care who I'm playing. Am I playing 6 max or heads up? I didn't care. I just played and lost half of my bankroll at the heads up match, for example.
I remember back in the day when I think this is when scripting and stuff became popular. I mean, you went through this time as well, right? That there was like a negative belief around bum hunters. It's like, oh, but this guy's a bum hunter, you know? And
yeah, I remember.
I think it was Elliot Rowe. I heard him say, yeah, who do you think is reinforcing this this belief? It's the bum hunters, because they don't want you to bum hunt. They know how profitable it is.
Yeah, I remember myself. I was like, I didn't respect the bum hunters. Like, like they are not even poker players, to my perspective. Like,
short stackers and bum hunters.
Yeah, exactly. Zero respect.
Yeah, and that was, you know, yeah, it took a little bit time. It took a little bit of time to realize that bum hunting, you know, it's part of the game, or at least you're trying to
Yeah.
optimize your Auli. It's not like you, and it obviously depends also on your own skill level. Like there's some real extreme bum hunters out there, and there's just
Mhm.
you know, like for example, when I play, I have room for a couple of slots, and when I have no
Mhm.
table, yeah, I'll happily jump into a nice four-handed game, no problem. But when suddenly a wheel comes sit down at another table, I'm like, hey guys, gotta go, because you know I have 4 to 6 slots, and I'm trying to
Yeah.
optimize my Auli for the slots that I have. So this
Mhm.
table is now gotta go. But sometimes I can
Mhm.
also be battling on 2, 3 tables because there's nothing else to my
Yeah.
disposal, right?
Yeah. Same for me. Like if I'm feeling like that, I'm playing my A game. So why not? But yeah, when I got 12 tables, like I have to be more careful who I'm playing. But nowadays, when I'm playing less tables, I can play those guys.
Seems like a very solid advice. What is the worst advice you've been given?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I'm not sure. I can come up with anything.
So you mentioned that you usually prefer to play, right? Play. Nowadays, studying, it seems like that's become a little bit more easy for you, right? Since you kind of, and I think like being pointed out where your leaks are and how to improve, obviously that helps build a little bit more route and also be more motivated to study. How has your study process evolved over the years?
Well, I started to study like maybe 5 years ago. So I spent only playing like 10 years. And when I found out you can actually study the poker, and yeah, nowadays I study maybe an hour in a day, and it's not still that much, but well, it's something.
How, like, I understand what you mean. Like in the past, I feel like it was more you just jump into tables and you've been put in a situation, you make a decision, you know, you try to figure out what's the best play on the fly. Where nowadays it's, you know, way more common that at least you have some sort of idea of a strategy before you even sit down at the table, where in the past it was maybe a little bit different. How has having a strategy before you actually sit down instead of having to figure out everything on the fly helped you in poker? Like how does your experience of playing poker nowadays is different when you at least have an idea of what to do in most scenarios?
I mean, it's easier when you don't have to focus on everything. Like you have the basic strategy at least. Like back in the day, you didn't have that. You just played every single person like a unique player, and you had to make your own adjustments on every player. But nowadays, when you have the basic strategy, it's a lot easier, and you kind of have to focus on some things. But most of the time, you are just autopiloting the basic situations, for example.
And then you already mentioned it, autopiloting, that then can become a threat. How do you make sure that, you know, autopiloting doesn't take to another level where you're not anymore processing new information to come in and allowing you to make better decisions?
Well, nowadays I notice that pretty quickly when that comes up when I'm playing my B game, and I try to take a short break or end up my session or something. But yeah, I try to avoid that because it really costs you money.
What would be a sign that like, oh, this is autopilot?
uh, well, for example, yesterday I was playing and I missed the super clear bluff spot on the river, and I kind of sit out leave instantly when that happened, and I've improved on that pretty much in the last year.
What do you do
Because
then? You take a step back. You figure out, hey, why did I do that? Or you go for a walk, throw some water in your face. What do you do?
Well, I went to yesterday. I went to sleep because I noticed I'm not in my best shape. So I was like, well, that's it for today, and I will play tomorrow again on my A game, for example.
But what if you just started? I mean, you know, it's 8 p.m. It's too early to go to bed.
Well,
how do you basically try to get back in your A game? That's kind of, I guess, the question that I'm trying to ask. What do you do to try to get back in your A game when you notice that you're playing bad, but you know there's still at least 4 more hours to go?
Well, it's hard to make in the same day. Like I need to sleep between that because it's rare when I play 2 sessions in a day. I only play 1 session in a day, and when I'm done, and I continue on the next day.
There's no trying to revive your current session.
No, it's pretty rare.
Where do you believe that most of the EV in poker comes from?
Well, it's obvious. Worse players than you are, but strategy-wise, it's well. There are still players who are not like learning. I mean, studying in a daily basis, like people who are not using GTO Wizard, and they are missing so much some basic spots which people know who are using the solvers. Like when you play, for example, 500 NL, there are maybe half of the recs are not studying at all. For example, pre-flop ranges, people are not 4-bet bluffing enough, and you just have to adjust that.
You mentioned like being a bit too passive in this case, right? Not finding the 4-bet bluffs. I think you already mentioned like people fold more, bluff less. Any other clear leaks that you see at like mid stakes? You know, all of our audience listening, maybe any advice for them, like some leaks that you could maybe point them out that they're probably doing wrong?
Yeah, being too passive overall. I mean, pre-flop, flop, turn, river. Like, it's true.
Did you have phases in your career where you were too passive, and how did you overcome it? Because I feel like if you're naturally just passive and risk averse, you know, it's not like you sit down today. I'm not gonna be passive and risk averse. Fuck it, I'm gonna show my stack. You know, it doesn't. You know, I've tried that, but it's a more long term process. Would you say that you're naturally a bit more passive, and how did you? If so, how did you overcome it?
Well, when I started to play poker, I 3-bet 50%. So I was super maniac when I started, but then I got maybe passive side, and some points I was super passive because I was playing too many tables and too many hours. And when I play too much, I just naturally go too passive. So I try to keep my sessions shorter nowadays. But yeah, definitely I had that time on my career.
What do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions or flawed beliefs that people have about poker or about being a professional poker player?
Well, they think they are playing against computers on every table, and they are following the solvers, like calling too much to people who are not bluffing on any street, for example, or calling 4-bets too light maybe against people who are not 4-bet bluffing anything, for example.
So it feels like they're not taking in consideration the fact that they're playing against humans, and you have to adjust against humans. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. Especially for players who are not experienced, like the players who studied only with the solvers, like in 5 years, and they don't know how to exploit people. Like you can overfold against 4-bets when people are 4-betting only kings plus, for example.
Was it something that you just understood intuitively, or did you need to note lock some sims and be like, okay, well, now I understand that if the sim says so, this is how it is?
No, no, I only always know that. I didn't have to node lock to understand that.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of where the experience, or at least starting pre-poker, I would almost say logical thinking comes in.
Mhm.
Where I just think logical,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
you know, well, the solver calls it because the guy's bluffing enough. Well, if the guy's not bluffing enough, you shouldn't call, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's pretty logical.
Adam, any phase in your career that you noticed that the game or like the meta was really shifting to heavy solver use? And did you see any common mistakes like the one that Samu just pointed out?
Yeah, I remember playing a reg battle. I think it was $300 heads up sitting goes, and then heads up you play big ranges. And then a opponent I was playing was using a massive ISO strategy, like ISO and made like 45, 50%, like super aggressive. And I was like, oh, this guy's easy money, I'm gonna destroy him. But he's put me in loads of tough spots. And I was like, wow, this ISO pressure has put my limping range under a lot of pressure in different spots. And then I realized he'd read like Will Tipton's book, which was a heads up specialist book, and solvers had just started to come out, and Will Tipton was applying solver knowledge through a book format, but there's also early solvers, and I was like, maybe these new kids on the block aren't that bad, and actually the strategy's changing. I remember that time it was just before solvers were just starting to come out, and people were talking about kind of G2 as a concept, and I remember that was definitely what players are doing. Also small sizings, as you mentioned, like this 25% C bet. It's like, and like go for it, like a raise pre-flop, then a 25% C bet. I'm like, that's not the default sizing, and it became quite obvious quite quickly that things were changing, that at least certain players were going down this avenue. And yeah, what was a bit of a thought experiment. Like, if they go down that avenue and I stick to my current strategy, who wins? And then after a while, you're like, wait a second, maybe keeping up with the times is going to be a smarter move. But yeah, I think there's obviously you went through all the changes, Samu. Like every change that's happened in poker, pretty much all of them that are meaningful, you've kind of experienced them, which is super interesting. So I'm wondering for you, like looking back on your poker career, what's been the most enjoyable phase of your career, and why was it most enjoyable?
I like to play back in the day when people were playing naturally, like back then when we didn't have any ranges, and it was just only fun game, and people were trying their best with their knowledge, and it was fair fight back then, like if you know what I mean. That was the best time. I think it was super fun.
What made it so fun? Was it just the rawness of the strategy, trying to exploit your opponents in the kind of fair fight?
Yeah, I mean, you could play on any style, and anyone didn't know, is that right or wrong, and was that plus EV move or anything. Like everyone played with different strategy, and yeah, somehow we ended up here, but yeah, it was fun.
How did you come up with your strategies back then? I'm thinking of myself when I was trying it with no solvers. We were kind of using the best player in that level to kind of replicate. Oh, he's doing good, so that must be a good move, and that must be a winning move. How were you deciphering for yourself what was your good strategy as you're kind of freestyling?
Yeah, I remember a few regulars who, well, I mean, they didn't fold ever to my c-bet at some point, and I was wondering why, what does they have, because they are calling, and I always had air on the turn. I checked, and they bet every time, and I folded, and I was like, that's happening too often, and I was leaking money to them, and I realized I maybe should float as well, like they do against me, and yeah, it was pretty funny.
Yeah, it was a lot of like picking up moves from like certain players. Oh, that kind of worked. Maybe I can add that to my game. That put me in a lot of trouble there. Maybe I can put other players in that kind of trouble. And so I was like thinking like through the strategy from like a first principles perspective of what am I trying to achieve here? What happens when I do this? And if he does that, how does my range respond? And yeah, kind of figure it out piece by piece and picking up moves along the way. And over time, you develop your little toolkit that works for a period of time. You're like, got this game solved. And then someone else comes out with some other stuff, and you're like, got to readdress my toolkit now to level up.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering for you, what's been the best investment you have made in your poker career? I'm guessing taking money out for your bankroll, you've invested things away from tables, but I'm also guessing you've made investments towards your poker career as well. So what has been the the best investment that stands out for your poker career?
Well, of course, Hold'em Manager at start. I mean, I started with Poker Tracker, if I'm correct. Yeah, all the softwares, of course. Then some video courses like Run It Once at some point. Lego Poker was a big changer for me. Like when there was the guy called Rene Jay Rosenkrantz. Do you know that?
Yeah, no, I watched my fair share of Lego Poker, Card Runners, Deuces, Cracked, Blue Fire. Man,
Yeah,
watched them all.
Yeah,
My
that was
favorite,
golden
favorite
time.
one was I think a Card Runner you had. What was his name? Daniel Benefield, I think it was his name.
Yeah.
He had the Raptor bat. Do you remember that?
Raptor
bat.
from
He
Full
was
Tilt.
like, his nickname was Raptor, and he would just 3-bet everyone in position with like an insane wide range, and then would follow it up with the Raptor bat, which is like, you know, a small 1/3, 1/4 pot C bet. He was definitely ahead of the curve, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was playing too tight at first at 6 max when I started to learning correctly back then, and when I saw Prini Rage's videos, he was playing like 40 VPIP and like owning everyone, and I was like, maybe I will try that also.
And don't forget open shoving, always the last hand of the video. Do you remember that? He would always last hand of the video under the gun, he would open shove. For the video.
Yeah, when you said yeah.
Keeps the viewers engaged, waiting for that last hand.
Yeah.
So for you mentioned earlier that you didn't use any softwares super early in your career. When did that shift? Because it feels like all the best investments you mentioned were towards softwares, video courses. When did your mindset change around maybe softwares could be helpful for your game?
I mean, I've always had the softwares, but I didn't know how to use them. Like I didn't check my stats or anything. I just had the HUD on my screen, and I had some numbers on there, and I was like, this guy is tight and this guy is aggressive. Like I could see all those stats, but I didn't really check my own results, like how was my 3-bet on last month or stuff like that. So I didn't know how to use that probably.
Is that what attracted you to work with Patrick? I know Patrick's known for his data analysis, getting into the numbers. Do you feel like that was something that you saw as maybe a big leak in your game that you could get better at?
Yeah, I took the next step to my game. Yeah, it's definitely true. Patrick helped a lot.
For players who maybe are a little bit averse to numbers and getting into data, you've been on both sides of the coin, so it's very interesting from your perspective. How do you feel like they can navigate in the current poker climate? By this, I mean players who are using solvers, using a lot of data. Can players who are maybe a bit averse to getting into the numbers, can they still compete with the guys who are using a lot of data? Or has there been a tipping point where there's no option but to join the data crowd?
Well, I'm still really bad at data. Like I try to learn them, but it's basically against my nature because I like to play more than study things. Like I like to see what happens when I do that, and I'm just pushing buttons basically. And yeah, sometimes I look up on the data, but yeah, it's rare.
It sounds like you're someone who likes to see that kind of cause-effect relationship. If I do this, what's my opponent going to do? So for you also mentioned earlier, like writing notes and labels, and I'm guessing keeping tags as well. I'm curious for you, like 15 years of taking notes, it can get pretty messy if you haven't got a system. Do you have any sort of like kind of loose system of how you tag players, how you take notes, or do you just like freestyle brain dump? Anything that comes to mind in terms of how you go about organizing or keeping notes as you're playing?
Yeah, it's a pretty big league to write essays to notes. Like, actually, my friend of mine does that. He writes stories on the notes, and if you are playing 6 to 12 tables, you don't have time to read that story. So you have to keep that as simple as possible. Like, but sometimes I do that myself, but I try to avoid that because it's not really helpful when you are playing.
Give us an example of a common note you might write on a player. Any example that comes to mind that you could use.
Well, this is passive, likes to call, or likes to fold, and pretty aggressive. That's yeah.
Yeah, you're trying to get that passive
as simple as
counter.
possible.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's trying to give you like a direction to go with your strategy based on what you picked up on. I picture my first year playing poker. I played heads up sitting goals, and I played one table. I used to make it massive on my laptop, full screen, heads up sitting goals. So it's quite a fast structure. And I used to write every single hand down, like every hand, like even if it wasn't a showdown, folded this one. And I used to try and guess because I never heard it for the first year. And yeah, it was so funny. By after a year, I was like, all these notes are completely and utterly useless. So I remember I was clearing all my notes and going, how should I actually take notes, and then reevaluate on how to think of what I would need in a hand, what would give me information that I could use in a player. See, I was just asking for you because I know you took a lot of notes in your career, so I'm guessing you've simplified, most likely, rather than got too complicated.
Yeah.
What is your definition of success?
Well, this might be a cliche, but when you can do what you like to do as living, maybe that's success for me. Money would be boring answer, so maybe when you can do what you really like to do as living, I mean, that's success for me.
When did you feel like you were achieving your version of success? When did you feel like you were doing what you like for a living?
When I was 15 and I was playing Counter-Strike as professional, and I quit school, I was thinking this is life I wanna be living. So that was cool back then.
That's amazing to at that young of an age to kind of go your own path and feel like your vision of success of like kind of stepping into I'm going my own path. I don't think it's one of those unless you've done a career where you choose what you're going to do and you've been very thoughtful and went with your interests. I think most people who haven't went to poker or other games or sports can't really relate to what it feels like to go, I'm doing it my way and I'm going to live and die by my own sword and how that feels. So yeah, I can relate to how that feels as well. So for you, in terms of your greatest contributor to success, what do you feel like that's been? And that's a hard question. It's been 15 years, lots of things, but I'm trying to figure out the core traits of you that have allowed you to reach the high stakes in poker. What do you feel like some things that come to mind that have helped you to go from the bottom stakes to high stakes? What are some of the greatest contributors in terms of maybe character traits for you?
I don't know, maybe all the comebacks when you have to move down to stakes and you grind it up again, and that's happened so many times for me, and many players would just quit at that point. And if your ego is on your way, it's impossible to do, and you have to be humble when you do that. And yeah.
How do you install that humility to deal with those crashes? I try to map out your kind of career in kind of highs and lows, and I did basically an up, a big crash down, then an up again, then a big crash down, then an up again. And those crashes would have been almost final for most people. So why do you feel like in those moments you were able to get through them? What is the kind of the key to keep going through those hard times?
Well, usually I need to take a break for maybe week or 2 or 3 or 4 weeks maybe, and I have to make a plan what I'm going to do next, and do I need to move down the stakes, and and make a plan and execute that, and yeah, it will turn out well.
When you make your plan, how do you approach that? Let's say maybe the second downswing, so you've went to PLO, lost a lot of your role, you're coming back to no limits, you're starting to play and going, wait a second, these guys are actually good again, we have to go back to the lower stakes. Tell us for like how that planning process went. Do you go into the woods somewhere and write in a little journal? Are you mapping it out on your computer? Tell us for like how you plan stuff.
Well, that happened. I I counted my bankroll, how much I had money left, and I I decided what stakes do I have to play now, and when I reach out the number X buy-ins for the next stake, I will move up again. And yeah, it takes time, but it's worth it.
So a very calculated plan in terms of what the next checkpoints are in terms of building your bankroll, then which levels you play, and like kind of a step-by-step process. In terms of a mindset, how did you deal with maybe the ego side is probably a good thing to touch on, because I think from a planner perspective, there's like a very logical side where it's like, okay, cool, here I am. I will just build my role again, get next level. Sounds easy. But in reality, it's like you're now having to deal with the fact that you're layers removed from where you were 5 years ago or 3 years ago. The money you had is now gone. The game you were learning is now tougher than it was. These things aren't as easy as just writing a plan together, because now you're dealing with maybe a bit of self-doubt, also the kind of feeling of not being where you want to be. So how are you wrestling the mental aspects in terms of the ego, maybe feeling a bit frustrated during this period?
Yeah, it's easier to say because it's really tough when you like when you have played the big games. It's hard to move down, but there's no magic tricks on doing like it's the only thing you can really do on that point. There's no yeah, it's the only thing you can do on that point. So
did you ever become like disengaged or think about quitting when you had to play lower? I'm just thinking, let's say you're playing 5Ks and now you got to grind out 100 NL. I can imagine there's a feeling of like, what am I doing? Like, what? Like, I can't even get myself to want to beat this game anymore because I've played so much higher. Did you ever have that experience?
well, maybe I remembered when I told my parents I can manage, so I had to grind from the small stakes again, my bankroll, and yeah, I decided to go on that way.
You said you believe that anyone can achieve success or get achieve success if they put time and energy into it. Do you believe that anyone can get to high stakes? Let's just say we'll filter out the world population. Let's say a professional poker player is at least playing 50 NL. Do you feel like any player who's got to that level could make the gap and the breach to high stakes?
Yeah, I believe so. If he likes to study and playing, and it's possible for everyone for sure.
Why
Nowadays, because the software nowadays, GTO Wizard, for example, is really useful, and you can basically learn everything on that. So why wouldn't it be possible? Back then, when you didn't have any softwares, I would say it wasn't possible for everyone. But nowadays, when you have all the tools, it's possible for sure.
It's interesting because it can seem like it's more competitive than ever and maybe harder to get the top, but at the same time, the tools and the things available allow the path to be kind of mapped out if you want it to be. And there is like you can get there with enough time and energy, but there's also another 1,000, 10,000 people who can also get there with the same kind of tools. So it's like it's one of those kind of, yeah, don't know the word for it, but it's one of those situations where it doesn't feel like it feels like harder, but also easy at the same time, which is a tough thing to wrestle with.
Yeah, of course, it's not it's easy to reach out to the highest levels, but it's a hard way, and yeah, everyone can do that.
If you had to start again with your poker career today, let's say you hadn't played poker and you just stumbled across it, similar to what you did 15 years ago, do you feel like with the new way poker set up, with the kind of solvers and GTO Wizard style, do you feel like you would still be drawn to the game and want to start your career in poker, or would you move away from it?
Maybe I would start over again. I mean, I still like poker, so why not?
Mm-hmm. If you didn't play poker, what would you do?
Maybe I would be a Counter-Strike coach or something, or advisor. I'm not sure.
Let's take Counter-Strike off the table. What else would you do if you couldn't choose the past life or the current life?
Maybe I would be a chef or something. Yeah, I think. I like making food.
Okay. What is it about making food that appeals to you? Anything about it that you enjoy particularly?
I don't know. It's like doing something with your own hands, and you don't have to communicate any. you can just do what you like to do, and it's so. I mean, yeah, it's fun.
What would you say is the biggest thing you've had to improve on in your poker career? So let's look at you now and look at you as a 20-year-old, your 20-year-old self. What do you think is the biggest gap between that person? If you met yourself at 20 and you met yourself now, and they shook hands with each other and got to know each other, what would be the biggest difference of that older self?
Many things have changed between that time. Like nowadays, I can table select and maybe being more wiser on those things. And yeah, I don't know. I would say table selecting is the main changer here.
Any other wisdom you'd pass down to your younger self?
You don't have to play against everyone. You can choose who are you playing.
When you were playing everyone, was that just out of being a bit naive to game selecting, or did you have like a bit of a point to prove? You wanted to play the best players? Because you did mention earlier as well that you had a bit of a disdain towards the bum hunters. You didn't really like those kind of guys. So for you, did playing the best players represent a success or a milestone that I'm getting good at this game?
Yeah, maybe I liked the challenge to play as tough opponents, which I could found on that time. So, and I think that had a really big aspect on my own game as well, because I had to play against best players. After that, when I played against weaker players, they felt so easy to play. Like even it's nowadays the same thing when you are playing with the best opponents and you go play your smaller stakes, it feels so much easier to play.
Yeah, I was going to ask, was there an upside to that? And as you mentioned, it sounds like there definitely was in terms of when you play anyone else, it feels like an easier game. Do you feel like other players play as many tough lineups as you used to? Do you feel like it's still a common thing? I know there's certain players who like to rank battle a lot. I'm guessing they probably know about game selection if they wanted to. Do you feel like looking at the poker landscape to other players, do you feel like go on your path of just sitting in tough lineups a lot?
I don't think it's not a thing maybe anymore, because you can study like with the softwares. Like I don't think people are not doing that anymore. Maybe some the super top guys are doing that, but on average, I don't think people are doing that.
Yeah, I was curious. You mentioned that with Counter-Strike, you were doing a lot of traveling, but when I looked up on your Handem up, I saw basically no caches whatsoever. Have you
One
ever done
cache.
one cache? One cache. Okay, sorry. Don't want to.
Month ago.
Don't want to take away this this glorious moment. Have you never really traveled for poker? And if so, what made you not travel for poker? Since it seemed to be something that you were liking when you were playing Counter-Strike.
Well, I used to travel more like 10 years ago on going some EPTs, but obviously I didn't success that much on those trips. I mean, those were like seeing friends basically and playing poker on the side, but those trips weren't so that serious at the time.
Online poker has seen a lot of changes over the years. There's obviously been a lot of threats, various programs being released. You know, we talked a little bit about seeding scripts. You talked about Hold'em Manager. We have studying MDA with solvers, etc. Also, obviously, the threat of cheating, RTA, bots, collusion, etc. How did online poker survive, and how does the future of online poker look like, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, recently I've played against some RTA guys, and on the sites which are not investigating like at all on those things. So that looks really bad at this point. But the biggest sites are, I think they are doing really good job on their security. But the smaller sites should do more work on that, I think.
I actually saw one future. I think it was ACR that implemented it. I only run across it yesterday. There was like an icon at the table. I was like, what does this icon mean? But basically, when you fold your cards, it's shuffled back in the deck so people cannot collude. I thought it was pretty good. I think they're doing it. They introduced it for OMA because OMA is obviously most sensitive to colluding and card sharing and shit. But obviously, if you fold, if you just put those hands and reshuffle them in the deck, there's no information, right?
Yeah,
I thought that was a pretty good solution, actually.
Yeah, it makes sense.
What would you like the main takeaway for our audience to be of the conversation we had today?
Study hard and table select is my advice to younger players. You don't have to play against everyone, at least the best heads-up players at your stakes.
Great episode that was. Thank you, Samu, for sharing your experience over those 15 years of playing online poker with us. Adam, any main takeaways?
Yeah, for me, there was two interesting chapters of his career. One was where he bought the apartments and he went from playing 2Ks and 5Ks to playing 100, 200 NL. And then the time where he took that kind of break to play PLO, again, lost most of his bankroll, had to start from scratch. These were kind of spread out over the course of like 6 years, but each time he had to kind of rebuild his role, and that's quite challenging from an ego perspective, just to go back to grinding it out. He mentioned that his process was to create a plan and just go, how am I going to get that next level, and just get back into it. But I think a lot of people might struggle to just have that kind of resilience, but also like the less of it, but the ego side, just go, right, I'm playing lower, and this is what it's going to take to get to the next level, and I'm committed. And I think what helped with that was this kind of strong goal that was always to play the highest stakes in the game. He mentioned that he always feels like he's climbing the mountain, that he's still not there yet. He's 15 years in, and he's still climbing the mountain. And for me, it reinforced the power of having an overarching goal that is so big and so far in the future that it can drive action for 15 plus years. I think that's the game, because you want to play long-term games. We want to play like infinite games that almost don't end. And to do that, we need a goal that we can't reach quickly. So if the goal is get 100K, if the goal is to create some financial freedom, we can get to those goals a lot quicker. To play the highest stakes, by his definition, is a much harder goal to get to. And even now, he still feels motivated to do it. So it's very important to get a goal that you can resonate with, which I thought was really key for him. Another one is adaptability. You don't play 15 years in a game that's moving fast without the ability to adapt to times. So this is, again, when things came out, and we talk about stuff like quite quickly, but there might have been like long periods, like years of Samu's career where he struggled, wasn't making money. The games were getting tough. Good players are coming out, solvers are coming out, and he's having to go, right, like, what do I do? How do I, everyone's coming to my world and throwing it upside down. How do I adapt to it? But he's obviously every time found a way to not only survive in that climate, but actually progress. And he's got to play higher and higher as his careers went on. So I think the ability to adapt to the current climate has been a bit of a superpower for him. And another one I wrote down is resilience. Like resilience to, again, goes in line with those two downswing periods, but to be tough enough to just go, right, whatever it takes, I'm just going to keep showing up and keep building my role. So those are the main ones. I think there's 15 years of wisdom there in terms of his story. And hopefully we captured it for the audience. How about you, Rene? What were the main ones for you?
When I asked him, like, because you mentioned in this goal, right, they always want to play higher. When I asked him, like, well, what do you have to improve? And he said, I'm not going to review all my leaks, obviously, on the podcast, which, makes a lot of sense. But he did then give an insight in terms of how we would go about improving in order to get there, right? And many players are very motivated to study, but they often lack like a good system. And he did give some insights, which is actually very similar to the ones that I would apply. Basically, the first thing you always have to do is you have to gather data on the hands that you're playing, and you have to analyze that data for leaks. And a leak, the definition of a leak would be any deviation from theory that is not deliberate and plays into a weakness of the population on average, or let's say opponents you play against on a frequent basis. And then from there, when you spot it, for example, I think we gave the example of, you're overfolding BVB versus a small c-bet. Go to GTO Wizard, shout out GTO Wizard. Set up a drill. We face a 1/3 c-bet. Even with like maybe the bottom part of your range, you can even say that. Let's say you have fourth pair or lower, and see which defense you're missing that and how they play on a later street, and you just drill them. In the end, you get better with experience. So I think league finding helps you point out what you need to improve. And then with the drilling, you can actually improve. And then when you play, sessions are always very important, in my opinion. We talked a little bit about autopiloting. I think a good way to prevent autopiloting is to go in with a session and use it as a place where you can put into practice what you've learned. So you always want to play a deliberate session that's serving a greater purpose. In his case, to reach the highest stakes. In your case, it can be to reach a certain goal. So I always ask myself, how can I approach this session in a way that it can help me achieve my long-term goal, right? And that's probably then to have your leagues top of mind and try to improve on them. If you do that consistently, you will improve at poker and reach the higher stakes. As he said it, right? He believes that everyone can make it as long as he basically said you have to study and play, but obviously, study correctly, he said study hard. I would say more study smart. It's usually people know the tools, but it's how to use the tools that kind of stops them. We talked also a lot about thinking practical and think about the cause-effect relationship. So in solvers, it's easy to go down the rabbit hole and only think about solvers. What does the solver do? But in the end, it's all cause-effect relationship. If you start looking at solver, and if you change the response or if you change something in the variables, you will see the actual more practical strategy that's going to be a highest EV. And he shared some stories about earlier in his career. Well, no one 4-bet bluffed. So the cause-effect relationship right now is I will just 3-bet 100%, right? Or, oh, nobody protects their checking ranges. So when they check, I step 100%. And when they bet, they're probably just strong. So I do overfolding. There are easy cause-effect relationships and ways of thinking about the game that old school players have trained. And I would say the good new school players, they understand that as well, right? I think it's mainly the people that are stuck at lower stakes, mid stakes, but are using all these tools. They need to adapt more this type of thinking. And last, I think this is something that he kept on coming back to, game selecting. Right? You don't have to just hop in all players. He also mentioned about reducing his table count. That really helped. In general, this is more in the realm of managing and optimizing your hourly, I would say. Because what you're trying to do when you play, you try to constantly optimize your hourly, right? Sometimes adding a table or removing a table or exchanging a table for a different table, all to optimize your hourly. Also taking consideration how long you're going to play. For example, my table selection would be different if I have a 3-hour session compared to a 6-hour session planned, right? I don't want to waste all my energy on a shitty game in my first hour if I'm planning to play 6 hours. But if I'm only going to play 1 hour, for example, my game selection would look way different. Something to take in consideration. All right. I want to thank Samu for coming on. I believe he said it was his first English interview ever. So shout out to him. Honored that you came on our podcast for the first time. I want to thank Adam for asking great questions as always. I want to thank the audience, especially the ones that are listening to us right now that have listened to our main takeaways. I want to shout out to our sponsors, GTO Wizard, Universal Poker. Go check them out. And if you like this podcast, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next episode.